what's the significance of the American pressure to remove the settlements and the West Bank occupation? What do you think the perception is on both sides?
Well, on the Israeli side and on the Arab side. On the Israeli side, the perception is that the United States is completely misreading the problem, because it is making a moral equivalence between Israelis who are building homes and Arabs who are blowing them up. And that is obscene. And so it seems as though the Americans simply don't understand. And the Israeli settlements in Judea and Samaria are strategic outposts of Western civilization. They enabled the Israeli army to fight against terror cells in places like Nablus and in places like Ramallah and in places like Jericho. And if they weren't there, they'd have to be created. So it's a lack of strategic understanding, and it's also a prejudice on the Americans' part that they apparently think that there are certain parts of the world where Jews should simply be barred from living because they're Jewish, and this is a policy that the Americans would never follow anywhere else, and so it's seen as bigoted. And on the Palestinian side, the American pressure on Israel to stop settlement activity or to destroy settlements and expel hundreds of thousands of Jews from their homes is seen again as American weakness and as a clear signal that the Americans are there to be bought, and that they don't have to fear them, that there's nothing that they could do, no number of missiles that they can shoot at Israel that will end American support for them, and therefore the Americans are not taken seriously either.
You think Israel's in a special category of American ally, unlike Australia and Canada?
I think it's perceived as such, and I think that that also explains a lot of the neurotic behavior on the part of the Israelis, that in fact, Israel is an ally of the United States like any other ally, in the sense that when Israel is strong, America's interests are advanced. When Israel is weak, America's interests are impaired. If Australia was weak, then the United States would suffer the consequences of losing such a vital ally in such an important area of the world. And the same is true of Israel, but unfortunately it isn't considered as such. Israel is rarely referred to as an ally by American policymakers. Rather, it's referred to as a friend, which is a meaningless term because, of course, South Vietnam was also a friend of the United States, and it wasn't stood by when it was overrun by the North Vietnamese in 1975. And being in the special category of ally for Israel also causes neurotic behavior on the part of the Israelis, where we think that really the basis of our relationship with the United States is that we're friends rather than that we're important, and the reason that we're important is because we're strong, and if we weaken ourselves through territorial compromises that render us incapable of defending us, then we will no longer be important to the United States as an ally, and we will no longer be an ally, just as if France were overrun or if Australia were overrun, the United States might come to their defense, but they would no longer be seen as allies.
In conclusion, do you think that there's some bias, a special bigotry towards Israel, either drummed up by the Palestinian propaganda machine for so long, or some inherent Christian bias?
Oh, I don't know. I think that the United States is inherently the least anti-Semitic country on the face of the planet, other than, of course, Israel, because there was no inherent anti-Semitism in the ideology that formed America. To the contrary, the Founding Fathers were philo-Semitic. But I think that definitely there's an element of anti-Semitism in policymaking circles that see Israel as a special case. You see it in places like the Israel Lobby by Professors Mearsheimer and Walt, where the anti-Semitism of their view of Israel informs their basic view of Israel as a strategic liability to the United States, when in fact it's an asset. And I think that, of course, when you look at the anti-Semitism in the Arab world, not only in the Palestinian Authority and also in the Muslim world, this is Nazi-like annihilationist anti-Semitism, where Jews are portrayed as subhuman pigs and monkeys who kill children for sport and etc. And all of this plays, of course, on a very biased view of Israel, where demands are made of Israel going back for years, not to defend itself, that the Americans would never be able to make of any other ally, or even, for that matter, any country that isn't a particular ally of the United States. The way that Israel is treated It seems that Israel is the only country in the world that is treated as in accordance with Christian theology of having to turn the other cheek to allow somebody to slap you on both sides of your face as opposed to defending yourselves, whereas the Christian countries of the world and the Arab countries of the Muslim countries of the world are expected to defend themselves against aggression. The Jews, for some reason, are expected not to defend ourselves, and this, of course, is a very bigoted demand of Israel, and it's one that Israelis have to understand that we need to forthrightly reject if we wish to long survive in our country.
It's a good punctuation, and I want to keep you on track from here. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Is there any other point that you would like to bring out? You know, vis-a-vis, you know, either the time of what's happening now with what's happening in the Israeli government, or the pressure on Israel, for instance, to not only arm but allow America to train the Palestinian troops. So, yeah,
well, I think that it's absurd, and it's a testament to the lack of seriousness on the part of the administration fighting the war against the global jihad, that America is now training and funding and arming Palestinian terrorists who are actively involved in the murder of Israelis. The United States keeps saying that Abbas's security forces and the Palestinian Authority have to be strengthened, but indeed the latest lethal attacks against Israelis in Judea and Samaria, which 3 Israelis have been killed over the past month and a half, were all carried out by the same security forces that the American government is training, that the American taxpayers are funding and arming. And this is antithetical to American interests on the most basic level. Why the Americans would want to be training terrorists to murder Israelis is obviously crazy. And I think that the problem is that the Americans have really gone out on a limb on this Palestinian statehood mistake, to the point where everything that they do to advance it simply harms America's interests and America's moral standing, for that matter, more and more. And of course endangers Israel.
But without statehood, what should Israel do? Or what could the Palestinians do?
The Palestinians have a de facto state in Gaza, and they've turned it into the largest terror training base on earth. So any Palestinian state today, given the addiction to jihad of Palestinian society, it is the most pro-jihad society on the face of the planet, would be a terrorist state. And so what may happen in the next generation is something we'll deal with then, but in this generation there's absolutely no cause to advance Palestinian statehood, because doing so simply means that you are enabling a terrorist state to be established in the heart of the Levant, which of course is inimical to America's national security interests.
Do you think the State Department has it wrong then in assuming that the obstacle to Saudi stability is the eradication of the thorn in the Muslim world's eye of Israel? That's the Saudi monarchy's problem from their constituents?
I think that's absurd, you know. And if the problem with the Saudi Arabians was something that happens 800 kilometers away from Saudi Arabia, then that, you know, most Jews aren't even allowed into Saudi Arabia. What do they care? They don't care. I mean, this is ridiculous to say that Saudis are bent into a religious rage because Jews are living in mobile homes on hilltops in Samaria is absurd. I mean, what do they care? That's ridiculous. It means that we're ignoring all the pathologies inside of their own society, blaming it on something that's completely irrelevant. I don't know any problem that's ever been solved that way, and I can't imagine that the Saudi Arabian problem with the United States would be solved that way either.